Hello, this is Alexis Kennedy with another episode of My Game's on Fire and I'm trying to fix it. As you might know, I put out an update for Cultist Simulator a week ago, which had a lot more bugs in it than I realised, and I spent the last week, with one exception, I got blind drunk trying to fix those bugs, and I put out, I think, 8 patches. So it's in a much better state now, and I think it's now gone from being a game on fire to being a game with a couple of nasty niggly bugs, and the UI is still a bit weird compared to what people are used to. But I'll keep working on it. It should be fine by next week. Anyway, I did another video about a weird bug I'd tracked down that people were surprisingly interested in, so I thought I'd do this one too. And this bug is about what happens when you come back from the Mancers. Spoilers, if you haven't played Cultist Simulator, there is a dream world you can go to that you can bring back stuff from. And let's fast forward this. And in fact, let's cheat and use the dev console to fast forward it. Yeah, you can do that. You can do that. Right, so off to the Mancers. Now, the Mancers is a whole different shebang, to use a technical term. And when you go there, the game still exists behind it, but it's paused. It wasn't entirely paused with the last bug I talked about, the one where the game could still suck cards off the Mancers into verbs. So one of the things I did was make bloody sure it was properly paused. In fact, it's meta-paused, which is why there's this little icon here. Shouldn't really be there. That's not something the player needs to see right now, but it means absolutely nothing's happening in the game. Totally paused. So I did that, made sure the game's properly paused behind. There was a bug where it wasn't. Let's go back to the video. And you'll notice the game is paused when I come back. So there's a couple of things ran into each other here. First of all, people liked it when they came back from the Mancers and the game was paused. Because if you come back from the Mancers, you're trying to work out what all this business is. I'm gesturing unhelpfully, trying to work out what all these windows are. And the times are still running. It's a panicky experience. People hammer the space bar. So now you pause when you come back from the Mancers. The problem is, when I made sure that was all working as intended, that the Mancers was paused, the game was paused while you're in the Mancers, and the game's paused when you come back from the Mancers, there was a problem. It was paused a bit too hard. So you'd come back from the Mancers and you couldn't unpause it. You had to exit the main menu and go back in and everything works, which is what we call, I think, a priority 4 bug, maybe a priority 5. If priority 3 is the game is crashing for quite a lot of people, pri 4, pri 5, it's a bad experience, but it's an unusual one you can get around. Pri 5, maybe. So I've been trying to reproduce... So I fixed this bug. The Mancers wasn't paused, locked and paused when you came back from it. It's just nicely paused, so you can continue. There we go. Now, some of you will be thinking, he's not telling me the truth. My version of the game, the Iris patch, as I record this video, my version of the game, I've just come back from the Mancers and I can't unpause it, even though you said it was fixed 3 patches ago. And the reason is that you can't see the thing I just did, and I couldn't see the thing you were doing when you were trying to unpause your game. Now, I'm going to explain that because it sounds really enigmatic. Let me just reload. Before I explain what the bug was, a tiny pro tip for anybody doing game development. You'll notice when I closed the Unity editor and started it, the game reloads back to the same state. One of the few good decisions I made when I was developing Cultist Simulator at the very beginning, when I'd done no coding in years, I was trying to relearn all the stuff, was I made sure that the saving loading worked more or less from the beginning. I didn't leave it till the end. And I have been attached to projects from time to time where people think, well, the saving and loading is the boring bit. I'm enjoying doing the stuff where you move the tiles around and write about how frightening everything is. So I'll do the saving loading last. It's also fiddly. You want to do it first for 3 reasons. First of all, it's much harder than you think it will be. Saving and loading, speaking as somebody who used to be a web dev where everything is in a database, is a constant festival of fuck. And you want to make sure it's defucked as much as possible. Secondly, if you do it at the beginning, you'll be testing it all the way through your development. That will make your life much simpler. And save file bugs are the least fun to track down of anything, apart from maybe sort of low-level graphics bugs, which I just can't do and say update your video drivers. And the third reason is it's really useful when you are testing everything else in your game just to be able to transparently save and load a state rather than having to recreate everything from scratch. I'm really glad I encourage people to send me save files for this as well. Anyway, so game dev bither over. Let's go back to the Mancers and talk about why the thing that was happening for you when you couldn't unpause from the Mancers was not happening for me. Oh, brinkmanship. Make sure put help in so we go to the right place. Fast forward. Off to the Mancers. It's paused. Pick up the card. Unpause. Wait, can you hear that sound? That sound is me frantically having the space bar and it doesn't unpause. It doesn't work. Doesn't work if I press N either. So what happened here was the first time I showed you this bug not happening, I came back from the Mancers and I hit the N key for normal speed. And as soon as I did that, the game started going again. What many of you who are now going, have been doing is, when you come back from the Mancers, you've hit the unpause space key because you're used to hitting space to pause and unpause as you do in a lot of games. So to be clear, you're not doing anything wrong. This is my code. Pausing and unpausing in Cultist is a bit more complicated than it sounds because because when you unpause, you want to go back to the speed you were going to before. If you hit normal, you go normal speed. Hit fast forward, you go fast forward speed. Hit unpause, you want to make sure you go back to whichever of those speeds you were at beforehand. So there's a little tangle of logic that says if this, then that. And I've reworked that tangle of logic a couple of times, so it's much cleaner than it used to be. But there's a bunch of special cases around this and around times when the game overrides pausing and all the rest of it. That means that sometimes it gets complicated. And what was happening here is if somebody hit the unpause button, then it got locked permanently in a pause state unless they went to a menu. If somebody hit the normal button, they were fine. But if somebody hit the unpause button, then they were locked, and hitting the normal button no longer did any freaking good. And it took me a good day and a half to work this out, despite loads of people saying the game's still paused, because people just kept saying, I paused the game, I unpaused the game. Almost nobody, let me rephrase that, literally nobody thought to say, I pressed the space button, I pressed the N button. I did ask people if they clicked or used keystrokes. People told me that. But you just don't think about this stuff. And if you do think about it, you don't remember. It's one of the reasons game dev is hard. What I did, and again, I guess this is worth me suggesting to other people, is I put a lot more logging in about pauses that wasn't in there before. This is why I asked people to send me their player log as well as their save files, because I can often get this kind of information. What I could see is somebody comes back for the Mancers. I can see, this card is turned over when they're in the Mancers and it comes back. I can also see there's a bug up there that's something completely unrelated that I'll have to look at, but it's not to do with this. And then I can also see that this email was sent to me by a gentleman called Robert, and I can see that Robert has been hammering his pause button, and the game keeps saying, I'm trying to pause, but I'm already paused, and I'm going back to the native speed, which is paused. Anyway, if you come back from the Mancers and you haven't seen this video in the next 3 hours, then you can get around this bug by hitting N rather than space, or by clicking the normal speed button. But I have a patch up there tonight to deal with it. Thank you very much. And do we say have a spooky day on these? I guess we do.